I want to show you not only how to read, but I want to get you started on the path. So here are a list of 20 books that I recommend, and if you're not a huge reader already, I think these would be a great start. Obviously, there are not specific skill books. Remember, we talked about skill books being one of the 3 categories that you want to read as well. But if you haven't been a huge reader up to this point, I think they are books that can stimulate your mind and books that can really change your life if you take the takeaways and apply them. So I'm also going to share with you what my big takeaway was from each book. And if you're interested, I'll include a link to each one in the resources section of this video as well. And they're in no particular order. Just wanted to give you a list of 20 books that I just pulled out of my bookshelf that I think you'd really enjoy. So first book is Think and Grow Rich. This book was written by Napoleon Hill in 1939. And I think Napoleon Hill in a lot of ways was way ahead of his time. And this is one book that I really recommend. It really stimulates your mind and a lot of big takeaways. For me, the main takeaway from this book is to have a definite purpose, to have a definite chief aim. You know, a lot of people, they just drift through life. And as he says in one of his recordings, actually, he says the wear and tear of living isn't worth it if you don't have a definite purpose. So this is even bigger than a goal. You know, a lot of people have goals, but this is having a definite purpose that dominates your mind and that you move towards. That was my big takeaway for this one. And by the way, he also has, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called Napoleon Hill Rare Recordings, and there are 9 videos. And it's recordings of him actually talking, and those are also really great. Next book is The Magic of Thinking Big, along the same lines of how your thoughts can literally change your life. And my big takeaway from this book, my actionable takeaway, was to have what he calls a sell yourself speech. So he gave a story of a salesman who every time before he would make a call, he had a little pitch that he made to himself that he would recite. He would say his name, and then he'd say, "You're a big thinker, so think big about everything." And then he'd just go on about, what type of person he's, kind of like affirming to himself who he is and getting himself in the right state of mind for those key moments. It's like Bud Fox said in Wall Street. He said, life is made up of a few moments. This is one of them. And it's really true, There are a few critical moments in life that we need to perform in. And I think having a pitch like that you make to yourself out loud with emotion can really get you in the right state of mind for those key moments. Next book is a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And this was written by Maxwell Maltz in, I think, 1960. And he was a plastic surgeon, but he discovered the idea of the self-image and how our self-image literally determines how we act and what results we get in the world. And he figured out how you can change the self-image through psychological principles like visualization. And he would actually see if he can get people that came to him for plastic surgery. He'd first see if he could change their self-image to the point where they no longer believed they needed it. Really interesting, really powerful, can really change your life. Next book is Sam Walton's biography, Made in America. This book just really shows you what it takes to succeed. In today's world, there's so many things about get rich quick and working less and getting better results. And yes, it's very important to get a good output. But at the same time, when you read about Walton, every time they were on a family trip, he would stop at different department stores with his legal pad, or how he would go through Price Club with a voice recorder. And all these things, you just see the commitment that it takes to succeed. Next book is Pour Your Heart, which is Howard Schultz's memoir of Starbucks up to the public years of 1997, which is when I think this book was written. And really inspiring story, shows you that if you have a dream, you can make it happen. And the big takeaway is, if you sell something, especially if you sell a commodity, you want what you're selling to be bigger than the item itself. It's kind of like, I think it was the founder of Revlon who said, we don't sell cosmetic products, we sell hope. And likewise, Howard Schultz realized that Starbucks wasn't selling coffee, but the coffee experience. They were selling the community. and the romancing of the coffee. Next book is The Go-Giver. This is something I listened to in the car actually instead of read, but a really great story. The main takeaway was the power of giving and how giving is really the secret to getting and success. Next book is Bill Walsh's The Score Takes Care of Itself, his philosophy on leadership. And a really great book. And the main takeaway from this one is to have a standard of performance. You see, when he came to the 49ers as the head coach, he didn't say, hey, my goal is to win Super Bowls. He said, this is my standard of performance. And he made a list of things that he expected at all times for how practice should be run, for how people should dress, for whether or not they could celebrate after a touchdown, all these things. And his job, he said, wasn't to win or lose, but to execute his standard of performance. And if it didn't get the results that he wanted, it means they just had to up their standard of performance. And this really translates into business as well. You know, instead of focusing directly on the result, the solution is to have a standard of performance, to have values like Jack Welch talks about in his book Winning that are actionable, specific behaviors that you expect from your team and yourself. Next book is Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. I also like his book, The Effective Executive. I'd actually recommend both of them. This one's a lot smaller, really short, and the main takeaway is to really know yourself. You need to know your strengths. You need to know how you learn. You need to know what your passions are. You need to know these things because they will help you make the critical decisions in life and it'll help you manage yourself correctly. Next book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This book is a book I read in college actually, and it completely shatters the myth of the path that we all think we need to go on when going in college. You know, we think that the best thing to do is to get a job, and we realize how what you really need to be is an investor. And that's what this book really illustrates, and I really recommend it. It also redefines how you think of an asset and a liability. You know, a lot of people think of their house or a car as a liability, as an asset, but he points out that anything that takes money out, that takes cash flow out from you is really a liability and should be treated as such. Another book is Chip and Dan Heath, brothers. They wrote a book called Made to Stick, and it's the 6 principles that make some ideas stick. So, like why do certain stories or, anything, what makes them stick? He breaks it down, and there are 6 principles. The one that I really took away is simplicity. In today's world, we're all about making things complicated. But when you could really boil something down to its core components, it's much more likely to stick. It's really powerful, really great examples. One example I really liked, he was talking about they were talking about Southwest Airlines, and the co-founder said that the key to running the company isn't all these complicated decisions. The single key is to realize that they are the low-fare airline, and that simple idea should guide all their decisions. Another book by same authors is Switch: How to Change When Things Are Hard, and they actually took a framework from a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and they pretty much say that we want to change, but the problem is that willpower is not enough to get us to change. You see, we all only have a limited amount of willpower, and trying to use willpower is like being a rider who is riding an elephant and trying to control that elephant. And our elephants are like our emotions. So they talk about how to control both the rider, the emotion, and your environment to make changes stick, both for yourself and to get other people and your company or whatever it is you're trying to change, how to get those things to change. Another book that I really like, I actually really like Al Ries and Jack Trout, is The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And a lot of them are actually counterintuitive to what you learn in school. And by the way, that was one of my big takeaways when I was reading all these books. It's often the opposite of what you learn in school. And one thing they talk about, which was, I would say, the big takeaway from this book, is don't try to be the best, try to be the first. You want to create a category. And look, I'm well aware that the first doesn't always win. A lot of times it's actually the second or third player that wins. But you always want to create a category. You don't want to just make slight improvements to a competitor's product and expect to win, because marketing is done in the prospect's mind. It's done in the person's mind. And it's very hard to change a mind once it's made and once it's been committed to an already existing brand. The next book is The E-Myth Revisited. It breaks down why most small businesses fail, and the big takeaway is that most people think that they want to go and work in the business, but what you really want to do is work on the business and set up systems rather than work in it. Another book that's helpful is Difficult Conversations, and it just gives you a framework to use to go about difficult conversations. And the big takeaway really is, instead of just going and accusing someone, really strive to understand first, and then just share your thoughts as well, realizing that neither one is 100% correct. There is no set in stone correct answer about it, and then working together to find a solution. Another book that I really like is Flow, which is all about the psychology of optimal experience. And it's pretty much about the idea of how to get in the zone and explaining and giving examples of how people got in the zone. And the main takeaway is that we get in the zone when the degree of challenge meets the degree of skill that we have, when we're fully focused, fully immersed. So you really want to have high challenge and high skill so you can really get in the zone. And one way to do that is you want to turn everything, you want to create a goal and make things into a game. Another book that I really like is a book called Influence. And in this book, Cialdini talks about the 6 principles or triggers that get people to act, that persuade people. And it's really powerful, and you can use it in all sorts of marketing. You can use it when with dealing with people, and it's really powerful. Another book is Peace is Every Step. You see, I think it's really important, in addition to having your mind right, having your beliefs right, and having your education right, I think it's really important to have peace of mind. And this book, I think, really helps. The big takeaway was actually just how to really meditate, and focusing on your breathing, and a little prayer that you could say to focus on each inhale and exhale. And it's been a great practice it is a great practice that can really get you centered at any point during the day, regardless of what's going on. And another book along the same lines is The Power of Now, which just helps you disidentify from your mind a little bit, which is a good thing. Again, helps you find a little bit of peace. Another book, and this is more of a specific skill book than a general book, but I just think it's very important in general to study advertising and copywriting. I've read a lot of books on the topic. This is one that I really liked. I think you could actually find it online because it's out of print, but and the used versions are pretty expensive, so I think you can find it online and print it out like I did. And the main takeaway that I took from this one is to realize what step or where in the scale the market is in. A lot of people make the mistake, they try to make these crazy claims, but you need to remember that if people have heard those claims too much, they stop believing it. So at that point, you need to start focusing on how the product fulfills those claims, how it makes it happen, versus focusing on the crazy claims itself. So for example, if you have a weight loss product, you no longer want to just focus on the idea of, hey, lose 20 pounds in 2 days. You want to focus on, this product does this to burn fat. Interesting reframe there. And finally, for the last book, I really debated on what book to put in here, whether to put another success book or a specific skill book or another biography. And I don't want to give you too many specific skill books because I think it depends on what it is that you want to do. But one that I think is applicable to anyone is a book on negotiating. And one that I really like is a book called Secrets of Power Negotiating. You see, why I like this versus all the other books on the topic, or at least a lot of the other ones on the topic, and definitely why I like it more than the negotiating class that I took in college, is that in those other books and in college, we just talked about, debated all these topics of who should make the offer first, what do you use this or that. It was just all theory, really. And what I really appreciate about this book is that it tells you specifically what to do, whether it's right or wrong. But I really think that the principles in here are sound, and they've helped me out a lot, and they've saved me in a lot of cases, just even using a few of them. So that's another book that I recommend that I think can help you out a lot. So those are 20 books I recommend, and obviously there are a lot more, and I really hope that you read even more than 20 this year. But these are books that have really impacted me, and I hope that you get a lot out of them, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of this course as well.